Go ahead and put down those disgusting, greasy gaming controllers. Stop sniffing Sharpies. Put the Yu-Gi-Oh cards away for just a couple of minutes, you nerds. We're about to do a really deep dive on one of the best Marvel characters. We're going to be counting down the top 5 Iron Man / Tony Stark suits. I'm mostly going to base this list on functionality, capabilities of each suit, and obviously how stylish they look. It's not enough to just save the universe or the galaxy or the planet. You have to also be able to look really good while doing it, and that's what we're gonna base our list on. But let me know in the comment section if I missed any top suit that you really enjoyed or you really liked in the comic books. We might do an MCU list later, but for this particular list we're only going to be looking at the top 5 Iron Man suits from the comic books. Let's get straight into it with number 5. We have the CE1 suit, which is also referred to as the Heroes Reborn Timeline Iron Man suit. I'm not going to dive too deep into this particular little pocket of the Marvel universe. It was basically a way for them to relaunch every single Marvel character in their own unique way. It didn't last too long and eventually they scrapped it, but this basically was a way of them getting saved from the Onslaught whole situation. Basically the entire Avengers squad was saved by Reed Richards' son. They were placed in this alternate dimension or this alternate little storyline, this little pocket, and a lot of people criticized the suit when it officially came out. A lot of people felt that it was kind of a step backwards from what we were used to seeing from Iron Man. It wasn't the sleek, cool design. It kind of reversed a little bit back and, you know, made it a little bit weird and awkward. He was always hooked up to these big giant cables and constantly needed to be recharged. But I personally liked it. It was kind of a grittier take on the Iron Man suit, especially, you know, in modern day times where everything is basically nanotechnology or, you know, highly advanced, sophisticated technology. But this kind of reverted back to what Iron Man was. It was this big giant clunky iron suit that he had to wear, and in this particular case he actually had to wear it to stay alive. Tony Stark and the Avengers eventually returned to the Earth 616 timeline, and it is basically scrapped and remade, but it was still a very memorable, I think somewhat criticized suit, but in my personal opinion it definitely deserves a spot on the list. For number 4, we're going to be looking at the Iron Man Armor Model 8, and it is also commonly referred to as the Silver Centurion suit. It was first featured in Iron Man 200 all the way back in 1985. It is definitely not a modern suit and doesn't look as sleek as what you would expect, especially after seeing so many iterations with the MCU. But this is actually one of those really iconic suits that used a differentiation on the color scheme. This is also the suit that was able to defeat the Ironmonger, so it is definitely powerful and not to be taken lightly. It was also used for a brief period of time during the beginning stages of Armor Wars, which only lasted about a year from around 1987 to around 88. The story basically revolves around the idea that some of Tony Stark's secrets are being sold to villains, and this armor definitely plays a huge role in that particular storyline. Like I said, not as sleek, not as modern as we're used to, but it was still a really cool iconic armor that served a pretty important purpose in a very rough history regarding Tony Stark's legacy. For number 3, we're looking at probably the newest suit on the list thus far. We're going to be looking at the Iron Man model armor number 45, which was used when he decided to team up with the Guardians of the Galaxy for a brief period of time way back in 2013. The suit was basically created with the idea that it would be able to adapt in space. The suit had many abilities and capabilities, but one of the highlights was that it would have the capability to still interact with the suits back down on Earth. Even while Tony was zipping all around the galaxy, he would still be able to control the suits. Even though it definitely used some similar color tones, it used some similar palettes that Iron Man is used to. The way that the Iron Man was designed or drawn up in the comic books really gave it a very cool look. Those of us that are big diehard MCU fans were also holding out hope that Tony Stark would whip this suit out particularly in Infinity War, where he actually decided or kind of was forced into a situation where he teamed up with the Guardians of the Galaxy and they had to square off against Thanos. I think that would have been a really good nod to those of us that are big comic book fans and fans of the MCU, but unfortunately we did not get that pleasure. Moving on to our second spot on the list, we're going to be looking at Model 38, which is also known as the Bleeding Edge Iron Man suit. Its first appearance was in Avengers vs. X-Men #5, which made its debut in June of 2012. The suit was actually made with the objective to combat against Phoenix, which was a very powerful cosmic force that had the intention of arriving on planet Earth. There's a portion of the X-Men that are basically trying to protect Phoenix, while a team comprised mostly of Wolverine and some Avengers are trying to stop Phoenix, as it could be very potentially harmful for planet Earth. Eventually, what ends up happening is Iron Man actually meets the Phoenix and shoots a disruptor, only to find out that the Phoenix basically ends up combining with about 5 different X-Men characters, which leads the X-Men team to believe that they're now much more powerful. But regardless, I feel like the Bleeding Edge Iron Man suit just signifies so much for the era. I think it was a great representation of what comic books were at the time, and we have seen this particular suit adapted many times by different toy companies, and I think most of these have been able to perfectly capture what the suit was all about. Our top spot is actually going to go to one of the more modern iterations of an Iron Man suit. Thus far, we're going to be looking at a Donny Cates creation. For those of you guys that are familiar with Donny Cates, he's had some amazing Immortal Hulk runs as well as some really good Venom runs. He's had some amazing storytelling involving a lot of the symbiotes, but he was also a big giant force with the Thor universe. The first appearance for this suit was actually in Thor #25 in May of 2022. Yes, it is an incredibly modern Iron Man suit. This particular iteration actually lasted very little, was eventually destroyed by the combination of Hulk and Thor, but the design for this particular suit was just absolutely divine. Donny Cates was in his prime while writing this particular Thor run. However, just to put things into perspective, in case you guys really want to question why this suit is #1, this was actually a repurposed Celestial Corpse that Iron Man or Tony Stark in this particular instant decided to basically recreate or repurpose it into an Iron Man suit, which is one of the main reasons why it was so extremely powerful. Like I mentioned, he was able to subdue or defeat Hulk, who by then wasn't being controlled by Bruce Banner, but then also almost was able to take on Thor. Unfortunately, by then the suit was already basically falling apart. As I mentioned, it had a very short-lived lifespan, and it was a little bit frustrating to see it gone that quickly, but as I mentioned, it is definitely one of the more powerful suits out there. It just didn't get enough attention in the comic books. But anyways, guys, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is my personal opinion. I wanted to kind of find the more unique suits that not everybody has heard of or is too familiar with. But as I mentioned, I'm very interested to see what you guys have to say. Let me know in the comment section what your favorite Iron Man suit is. Maybe I'll do another top 5 list where we talk about some honorable mentions or something along those lines. But as I mentioned, let me know in the comment section. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you.